Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, morning wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Emma Otheguy. She is here to celebrate her beautiful new picture book, Sofía Acosta Makes a Scene. Before we invite Emma into the studio, we want to let you know that the Reading with Your Kids Juneteenth, a holiday for all of us episode of the podcast, just received an AVA Gold Award. We're really, really honored. This episode of the show was the brainchild, the inspiration of our then intern, Justina Thompson. Justina was a freshman at Emerson College, and she came on board. What a great job Justina did. She came to me, she said, hey, Juneteenth is coming up. Can we do a special episode celebrating the holiday? And I said, absolutely. And with Justina's help, we invited Karen Parsons, Dr. Michael Waters, Malcolm Mitchell, Amanda Lynch, Kay Ibora onto the show to tell us what Juneteenth means to them. It was a really well-received show, and we were absolutely blown away when we received the AVA Gold Award. Thank you so much to the folks at the AVA Awards. Thank you so much to Justina Thompson, to our guest for that special episode, and most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for telling your friends and family all about us. Thanks so much for being here today. Joining us right now from New York, our guest is here today to celebrate a really wonderful book. It's called Sofía Acosta Makes a Scene. Please welcome to the show, Emma Otheguy. Hey, Emma, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm really excited about this book because just reading the synopsis of it, it brings back lots of memories of when my daughter was a dancer, and it was the most important thing in her life.
I love hearing that. I know we were just chatting before we started recording about your daughter's dance life and just what an impact that dancing, I think particularly doing ballet, can have on a lot of young people's life. I did ballet at my local ballet school until I went to college, and I think it was a really important part of my life that is reflected in Sofía Acosta Makes a Scene.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you said it makes a big impact on the kids who dance, because a lot of us, we automatically think, oh, ballet girls. And that's not the case. There are not as many, but there are certainly young men and boys who are dancers. And it's one of the things that I was so impressed with is the athleticism that is involved in dance. And dancers don't get the credit and don't get the recognition as great athletes as they should.
I think that's absolutely true. And in the book, in Sofía Acosta Makes a Scene, there are actually two male dancers who are really important. One of them is Sofía's little brother, Manuel, who is a big star at their local dance school, and he gets cast as Fritz in the Nutcracker every single year, and is just a really talented little boy. And then there's Álvaro, who is Sofía's family friend, who's actually a teenager. He's 17 years old, and he is visiting from Cuba because he is such a talented ballet dancer that he's been invited to perform with American Ballet Theater in New York, and that's why he's visiting Sofía's family. So for any male ballet dancers out there, this is a book that definitely spotlights that talent.
Yeah. So tell us about the story, please.
Yeah. So in Sofía Acosta Makes a Scene, Sofía is 10 years old. She's in the 5th grade, and she's from this family of ballet dancers. I've already told you about her little brother and her family friend Álvaro that's visiting. But her parents were also ballet stars back in the day before they had kids. They danced with the Ballet Nacional de Cuba, the Cuban National Ballet. And they also danced under Alicia Alonso. If you're not familiar with Alicia Alonso, She was a world famous ballerina. She came from Cuba at a young age to New York City, and she was really important in the founding of American Ballet Theater here in New York. George Balanchine, the famous choreographer, wrote roles just for Alicia Alonso. And then later in her life, she went back to Cuba and she founded the Ballet Nacional de Cuba. That's the Cuban National Ballet. So Alicia Alonso was this ballet legend. You know, if you know ballet, you know Alicia Alonso. And Sofia's parents actually danced with her in Cuba before she died. And then they came to the United States, where they are now performing arts teachers at the local high school where Sofía lives. So ballet is like literally in their DNA. It's so important to their family. But Sofía is struggling with ballet. She's having trouble keeping, dancing on time with the music. She can't figure out upbeats and downbeats. She keeps thinking like, is everybody making up this whole upbeat downbeat thing? Because I don't hear it. She is, just really struggling with the Nutcracker, which she's performing in. She's in the party scene, but she just can't keep up with the steps. So that's one level on which Sofía feels like she really doesn't fit in to her family. But the other level where Sofía is starting to feel like she doesn't fit in is with her peers in her town. She lives in this little suburb on the outskirts of New York City. It's, kind of a near New York City commuting distance. It is a predominantly white town, and Sofía and her family are one of very few Latin families in town. And when Sofía's friend Álvaro, who I mentioned before, the dancer, comes to New York, Sofía starts becoming aware of some of the racism and some of the anti-immigrant sentiment in her community. She realizes that some of her neighbors aren't really comfortable with this young man from Cuba moving to the United States. They say things like, he's taking away a job from an American dancer, a dancer from the United States. And so suddenly Sofía has a sense of like, okay, well, I don't really fit in with my family because I'm not a ballet dancer like them, but I also don't really even fit in my own town because I'm from this family of immigrants and I'm discovering that some of my neighbors harbor these anti-immigrant sentiments. And it's about how Sofía manages to make a place for herself and find belonging despite feeling really stuck in both her family and her community.
Yeah. What a tough thing to experience at 10 years old. It really is heartbreaking. I think every on some levels, everybody at 10 years old or 10, 11, 12 has that, who am I? Where do I fit in? I'm not good enough. I don't understand. Everybody else knows what's going on, but I don't, so I have to fake it. But when you start to feel like people hate you because of who you are, hate you because of something you have no control over, I think that's a different kind of feeling of not fitting in.
Absolutely. I think that one of the things Sofía realizes is that she can change being a ballet dancer, right? And I'll give away the ending a little bit, but she does find a way to stop doing ballet and to kind of make peace with her parents about the fact that she's not going to be a ballet dancer. But what's much harder, I think, are these dynamics in her community because she can't change who she is and who her family's story is. I mean, you can change what after-school activities you do, but you don't get to change your race or your ethnicity or your family's immigration status. Those are things that are intrinsic to who you are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What kind of conversations? And this is a book I love books like this because I think it's a book that different families are going to have different conversations around. What kind of conversations can you imagine a family like Sofía's might have as they experience the book?
Yeah, my hope is that if a family, and I know this is a Reading with Your Kids podcast, so if there are any other families like Sofía's family reading this book together, say that you're reading it, whether you're reading it parallel or you're reading it aloud in your family, my hope is that it will engender conversations about what it means to fit in within the family unit. Because one thing that Sofía realizes is that her whole life, the whole first 10 years of her life, she thought that to be an Acosta, you have to be a ballet dancer. Because that's who her parents were, that's who her sister is, that's who her brother is. And over the course of the book, she realizes that there are other things that make her an Acosta, that make her belong in her family. And it's not about the achievement. It's not about being great at dance. It's not about, getting a lead role in your ballet school's production of the Nutcracker. There are all these other things that make her family special and unique. And actually, if you look at the advanced reader copy, the quote from the book, this is a line from the very middle of the book, or maybe at the end when Sophia's really starting to have this realization. She's journaling in her class, and she was writing, the prompt for her journal was, what makes your family special? And she had started to write, we are a family of ballet dancers. And she crosses it out and she writes, we are a family that helps other people, including other immigrant families. And so that I hope if you're reading this with your kids, you have the conversation about what does it mean to be a member of your family? What, not only what makes your family special, but what are the things that make all the pieces fit together? What is the role that everybody has within your family? And then I think the next conversation is, what role does your family have within your neighborhood, your school community, if you go to church, your church community, your sports community, kind of wherever your networks, your communities fit, kind of how does your family relate to that wider context?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing that I hope every family reading this book will realize is something that you mentioned, that Sophia's family is a family that helps, Sophia's family is an immigrant family that helps other immigrants.
Yeah.
And that pretty much 99% of the folks here in the United States fall into that category. Some of us may have immigrated 2, 3, 4, 5 generations before, but we're all still ultimately new to this land, and somebody helped our family when we got here, and I think we have a responsibility to pay that back.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because one of some of the teaching moments in the book is a lot of fun because Sofía has a lot of fun, and she makes fun of her older sister for being, a total bunhead, and she's always teasing people, and she's just kind of a fun kid. But I think one of the teaching moments in the book is that Sofía's 5th grade class is learning about immigration history. And so it's a really powerful moment for Sofía because she's learning both, that theme that you just brought up about us being a nation of immigrants, and all of us everybody in the United States relates to immigration in some way. And we're all removed from immigration, or if you're a Native person, relate to immigration in different ways, but it is something that has, literally shaped our nation. And so I think that Sofía is reading about immigration, learning about it in school, and realizing, immigration is a big deal. It's something that affects me, and it's something that affects all of my classmates, no matter who they are. But she's also learning about some of the historical injustices in our immigration history. She learns about the quota system that determined, that set a quota for how many immigrants from different parts of the world could come to the United States. And until the quota system ended, about half a century ago, we limited the people who weren't from Europe who could come to the United States. And so it really favored Europeans in our immigration policy. And of course, that quota system has ended now, but we have new ways of prioritizing certain types of immigrants. And so it's kind of, I think that if your school is learning about immigration, if your kids are learning about immigration, I think, I'm the author of the book, but I think it's a nice opportunity to connect with that history and to question that history.
Mm-hmm. And I think, I don't think we when I was growing up, I sat down and watched the news with my parents because when I was growing up, we just barely had a TV. It was black and white, and there were 3 channels. And at 6 o'clock at night, that was the only thing I could have watched. But we sat down, and so we heard what was going on, and oftentimes we would have conversations about it. I don't think that happens now. I know it doesn't happen in most families now. Families don't sit down and watch the news together. Most folks are getting their news, unfortunately, from social media, which is very questionable. But I think it could be really helpful for families, when there are these important topics that are in the news constantly and that are affecting our country. It would be really wise for the family to sit down and find some books that talk about those different subjects so you can sit down and have a conversation about it. And because we want to help our kids understand what's going on. We want our kids to I don't want somebody else teaching this stuff to my kids. I want to sit down and talk to my kids. I want to be the person who says to my kids, we are an immigrant family. It was just 2 generations that my grandfather came here to this country. Somebody helped him. Somebody helped my mom because she was the first generation here. We need to help other families. And so I'm so happy that you've created this book to give those opportunities to families.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I've loved the way you put that, and just the idea of solidarity, of that sense of wanting to support people because you have been supported. I think that's really the ideal, the ideal in a lot of ways. I'm also it was 6:30 in my house growing up, but we were a 6:30 news family, and my parents still are. I always joke that the building could be on fire and my parents would be watching the 6:30 news, those 15 minutes, they're not getting up. So I definitely identify with that. And I agree that the way in which we get news has changed. I mean, I don't watch the 6:30 news in my house anymore because I don't have a TV. Mm-hmm. But I do think that having those conversations with our kids really from the very beginning is important. Yeah. Because if they don't learn it from us, they're going to learn other things from other people. And I think that in Sofía Acosta, she is actually, she's hearing a lot of ideas about the news, a lot of ideas about immigration from her friends. And her friends are saying a lot of offensive things that aren't true. Things about immigrants sneaking into the country, about immigrants taking jobs. And the only reason Sofía is able to say, wait a second, that's not right, I don't agree with that, is because she is from a family of immigrants that has been having that conversation at home. Mm-hmm. And so I think that this might serve as a reminder that somebody is talking to our kids about these things. Yeah. And it would be better if it were us.
Yeah. Yes, it's so important for us to remember as adults and teach our kids that every second of media that you are consuming or exposed to has been created by somebody intentionally, and they created it because they want you to do something. Maybe they wanted to give you a smile, or maybe they want you to buy something, or maybe they want you to think in a certain way. But media is created intentionally, and so when we know that, we can look further, and we can help our kids look further and to think, why? Even with Sofía Acosta Makes a Scene, you created this, and you wanted to tell a story. And it's important to sit down and say, well, what story did Emma want to tell us? And, one part of the story that we just kind of glossed over, and I think a lot of kids face it. I know my kids, having a dad who was somebody who traveled around the country doing magic, my kids had a lot of, I don't know if pressure, but a lot of folks said to my kids, so you're going to grow up to be a magician. And there are different times in their life. My daughter, when it was time for her to do a solo as a dancer, the dance teacher said, why don't we incorporate some magic into it? And it was a beautiful solo. I don't know if it was necessarily something my daughter really had a burning passion to do. My son at certain times would, yes, I have to become a magician. And I think that there's a lot of families out there, dancers, lawyers and a lot of families where kids feel this pressure. Oh, it's the family business. I got to go into the family business. I don't really want to go into the family business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's we put so much pressure on kids. I just want to pause and acknowledge that how much fun Mr. Kid must have had getting to say that my dad is a magician. I mean, that's just a sentence, you could live again just to get to say that sentence to someone with in all seriousness. So, that is really cool. And I think that pressure to, as you say, go into the family business or even just to excel, to be exceptional is so overwhelming for kids. I think that, what Sofía feels is this sense of if she doesn't do something, it's not like even, she can just go to the local ballet school and take ballet lessons. Like that doesn't feel like enough to her. She feels like she has to be cast in a lead role. She has to be exceptionally good at ballet. And I think a lot of kids, whatever extracurriculars they're doing, or even within school, I think a lot of kids feel like you have to get A's, you have to be on the honor roll, you have to excel, whether it's, if you're in the orchestra, you have to be playing first chair. If you're dancing, you have to have a solo. If you're whatever it is, right? If you're playing soccer, you have to do travel. I think that, that's just so much pressure. It really is a lot. I don't think I really have to say more because we all understand how much pressure it is. Yeah. And, I've thought a lot about where that pressure comes from, and I feel for kids because I think that the pressure is real. We put a lot of expectations on our kids. They live in a time that is competitive. It's hard to access to everything, to education, to housing, to transportation is really limited. And I think that's where the pressure comes from. And I wish we could create a world that would alleviate some of that. But I hope that kids who read Sofía Acosta Makes a Scene will see that Sofía finds ways to belong, to feel secure in her family and in her community, without having to be exceptional at dance. She kind of finds her things, and that's important. There was a conversation with my editor about whether we should give Sofía another thing. So for example, she has this hobby where she loves working on costumes. She loves sewing. She loves doing arts and crafts. And so, it was like, should she start like a club, or should she has another friend who's really into softball who, Laurita, this character, is such a big influence on Sofía. And so we thought, oh, maybe we should get, I thought like at some point I was like, maybe at the end, Sofía should decide she's really into softball instead. And actually my editor and I had the conversation and we decided, we're actually just going to leave this open-ended, for kids to see that like, yes, Sofía loves making costumes. She's probably going to want to work on the costumes for, next year's production of the Nutcracker. And maybe she likes, playing catch with her friend Laurita, but it's not like just because she decided she wasn't a ballerina, she has to sign up for the travel, softball team the next day. Mm-hmm. We really left it open for her to just be a kid who has interests and passions, but hasn't specialized, right. Doesn't necessarily have to excel at something.
Yeah. But what a healthy way to grow up. I think it's real. It's really hard for kids in high school to make a decision. Oh, next year I want to spend the next 4 years of my life majoring in this one subject. Oh, imagine, expecting an 8 or a 9 or a 10-year-old to specialize in something that they're going to focus on and excel in for the rest of their lives. It's really not. It's really not reasonable, and I don't think it's really healthy either.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Emma, where can folks go to find out more about Sofía Acosta Makes a Scene and find out more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always tell people, if you can remember how to spell my name, you can find me anywhere. So my name is Emma Otheguy. Otheguy is Otheguy. And so if you want to grab a copy of Sofía Acosta Makes a Scene, you could just go to emmaotheguy.com/Sofía. That's Sofía with an F. A little tidbit about the Spanish language is that there are there are no kind of double letters or, consonant clusters like that that don't change the pronunciation. So it's Spanish is a little bit shallower and easier in its spelling. It's actually easier to spell. So there's no PH in Spanish. So Sofia's name is Sofia, but it's just Sofia, no PH. So if you go to emmaotheguy.com, you'll find all of my books there. And if you want to just go straight to the page for Sofía Acosta Makes a Scene, just go to emmaotheguy.com/Sofia. And I'm also on Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah. I think go to the homepage because there's a whole lot of information there. It's really easy to find Sofia from the homepage, but you don't want to miss out on all the other great stuff too.
Yeah.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Sofía Acosta Makes a Scene, Emma Otheguy. Hey, Emma, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Doing things a little bit differently, our guest would be Maria Musafa. She writes legislation. She's going to be talking to us about some legislation she wrote that is helping to create inclusive environments for families at schools and in communities. She's going to talk to us about her job as a civil rights attorney and about how kids and families can make a difference in their community. It's a really, really fascinating episode. You don't want to miss it. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Emma Otheguy. Please be sure to check out Sofía Acosta Makes a Scene. I also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Skylar Strauss. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.